A man is about to receive surgery and says to his doctor, "I'm feeling really anxious. This is my first operation." The doctor replies, "Don't worry, it's mine too." That joke could be made into a story about unqualified surgeons. It wouldn't be a good story if it was trying to hijack our attention. A good story allows us to explore reality. Today, I would like to focus on two stories that speak to the human condition. Eckhart Tolle says that there are two types of movies. The first type comes to resolution through exterior means. The bad guy gets eliminated, or the protagonist is rescued by the cavalry or superhero at the last moment. The second type of movie is resolved through some inner transformation or the discovery of intelligent or imaginative inner resources. The movie offers the opportunity for exploration. It's this second type of movie that can inform our own lives. So today I'm going to present two true stories. Stories have always been a way to educate and entertain at the same time. To get the nutrition from a story often requires that we sit and reflect. Allow the story to settle in with us before moving on to something else. We don't tend to do that these days. Our culture tends to consume stories, one after another with little pause, easily forgetting lessons we might have integrated. Today, we're going to allow a little time to digest these stories. I'm going to suggest that you listen to both the story and your response to the story, your feelings, who or what you might identify with, and what you might find compelling. Our first true story is short, and it's titled A Chimpanzee at Stanford. It was written in 1986 and is told in the first person. And Jean Shore will be the voice of Fran Peavy.
One day, I was walking through Stanford University campus with a friend when I saw a crowd of people with cameras and video equipment on a little hillside. They were clustered around a pair of chimpanzees, a male running loose, and a female on a chain about 25 feet long. It turned out the male was from the marine world, and the female was being studied for something or another at Stanford. The spectators were scientists and publicity people trying to get them to mate. The male was eager. He grunted and grabbed the female's chain and tugged. She whimpered and backed away. He pulled again. She pulled back. Watching the chimps' faces, I began to feel sympathy for the female. Suddenly, the female chimp yanked her chain out of the male's grasp. To my amazement, she walked through the crowd straight over to me and took my hand. Then she led me across the circle to the only other two women in the crowd, and she joined hands with one of them. The three of us stood together in a circle. I remember the feeling of that rough palm against mine. The little chimp had recognized us and reached out across all the years of evolution to form her own support group.
Thank you, Jean. So take a moment, if you'd like, to review your response to the story. Take a few moments to put yourself in the story, explore how you might have reacted. Was there personal identification or aversion? And you could ask yourself what you might have done if you were there. So I'll pause here for about 30 seconds. This particular story is unlikely to occur today because research on lab chimps has ended in this country. But there are parallel stories happening every day where a dominant group holds another group as inferior and treats those individuals harshly. What I like about this little story is the fact that something intrinsic about Fran Peavy as a person invited the trust of that chimp without their ever having met. The next story is a true story by Terry Dobson, the first American Aikido master trained in Japan. Again, this story is told in the first person, Terry Dobson's perspective. The train clanked and rattled through the suburbs of Tokyo on a drowsy spring afternoon. Our car was comparatively empty. A few housewives and their kids, and I gazed absently at the drab houses and dusty hedgerows. At one station, the doors opened, and suddenly the quiet afternoon was shattered by a man bellowing violent, incomprehensible curses. The man staggered into our car. He wore laborer's clothing and was big, drunk, and dirty. Screaming, he swung at a woman holding a baby, and the blow sent her sprawling into the laps of an elderly couple. It was a miracle that the baby was unharmed. Terrified, the couple jumped up and scrambled toward the end of the car. The laborer aimed a kick at the retreating back of the old woman, but missed as she scuttled to safety. So this enraged the drunk, and he grabbed the metal pole in the middle of the car and tried to wrench it from its station. I could see that one of his hands was cut and bleeding. And as the train lurched ahead, its passengers frozen with fear, I stood up. I was young then, some 20 years ago, and in pretty good shape. I'd been putting in a solid 8 hours of Aikido training nearly every day for the past 3 years. I liked to throw and grapple. I thought I was tough, but my martial arts skill was untested in actual combat. As students of Aikido, we were not allowed to fight. I could hear my teacher's words. Aikido is the art of reconciliation. He who has the mind to fight has lost his connection with the universe. If you try to dominate people, you are already defeated. We study how to resolve conflict, not how to start it. The words kept going on over and over in my mind. I tried hard to follow those words. Once, I even went so far as to cross the street to avoid the pinball punks who lounged in the train station. But my forbearance exalted me. I felt both tough and holy. In my heart, however, I wanted an absolutely legitimate opportunity whereby I might save the innocent by destroying the guilty. This is it, I said to myself, getting to my feet. People are in danger, and if I don't do something fast, they will probably get hurt. Seeing me stand up, the drunk recognized his chance to focus his rage. Aha, a foreigner. You need to learn some Japanese manners. I held on tightly to the commuter's strap overhead and gave him a slow look of disgust and dismissal. I planned to take this turkey apart, but he had to make the first move. I wanted him bad, so I pursed my lips and blew him an insolent kiss. All right, you're gonna get a lesson, he said as he gathered himself for a rush at me. In a split second, before he could move, someone shouted, "Hey, Hey! It was ear-splitting, but I remember the strangely joyous, lilting quality of it. I wheeled to my left and the drunk to his right, and we both stared down at a little old Japanese man, well into his 70s, sitting there, immaculate in his kimono. He took no notice of me, but beamed delightfully at the labor, as though he had a most important, most wonderful secret to share. Come here, come here, come here and talk to me. The old man followed, as though he were on a string. He planted his feet belligerently in front of the old gentleman and roared above the clacking of the wheels. Well, why the hell should I talk to you anyway? The drunk now had his back to me. If his elbow moved so much as a millimeter, I'd drop him in his socks. The old man continued to beam at the laborer. What you been drinking? He asked, his old eyes sparkling. I've been drinking sake, he said. Speckles of spittle spattered the old man. Oh, that's wonderful. Simply wonderful. You see, I like sake too. Every night, me and my wife, she's 76, you know, we warm up a little bottle of sake and we take it out in the garden and we sit on the old wooden bench and we watch the sun go down. And we look to see how our old persimmon tree is doing. My great-grandfather planted the tree, and we worry about whether it will recover from the ice storms we had last year. Our tree is doing better than I expected, though, especially when you consider the poor quality of the soil. It's gratifying to watch when we take our little sake and we go into the empty of the evening, even when it rains. And he looked into the laborer's eyes, his own eyes twinkling merrily. The drunk struggled to follow the old man's monologue as he slowly began to soften, and his fists began to unclench. Yeah, I love persimmons too. Yeah? And I'm sure you have a lovely wife too. No, my wife died. And very gently, slowly with the motion of the train, the big man began to sob. I don't got no wife. I don't got no home. I don't got no job. I'm so ashamed of myself. And the tears rolled down his cheeks as a spasm of despair rippled through his big body. And now it was my turn, standing there in my well-scrubbed youthful innocence, my make this world right for democracy righteousness. I suddenly felt dirty. I suddenly felt dirtier than he was. And the train arrived at my stop and the doors opened. I heard the old man cluck sympathetically. Tish, tish, tish. My. Very difficult predicament. My. You come here. You tell me all about it. I turned my head for one last look as I stepped off the train. The laborer was sprawled on the seat, his head in the old man's lap. The old man was softly stroking the filthy, matted hair. My. You tell me all about it. Such a difficult predicament. You tell me. As the train pulled away, I sat down on a bench. What I had wanted to do with muscle had been accomplished with kind words. I had just seen Aikido used in combat, and the essence of it was love. I would have to practice the art for an entirely different spirit from that day forward. It would be a long time before I could speak about the resolution of combat. Terry's story ends here. Again, let's take a moment to reflect on your response to the story. Take a few moments to put yourself in the story. Explore where and how you reacted. Was there personal identification or aversion? And you could ask yourself for an honest response. What might you have done if you were there? This was before cell phones, by the way. We'll pause for about 30 seconds. Thank you. Now, I have a Far Side cartoon that Laura is going to put up on her screen. Okay, has everyone had a chance to see it? If everyone's had it, let's come on back to me. I can identify with both the cartoon and this story. When I had achieved a level of excellence at karate and was the sensei, I had a fantasy of coming upon a woman in distress, perhaps in a park, under assault from 3 to 7 men. I would ask them to stop, but they wouldn't take me seriously. This would be a chance for me to dispense justice using karate, hopefully with a minimum of injury. I'd beat them up. Only a few days later, after having this fantasy, I came upon an article of a Tai Chi master who was known for being able to de-escalate situations through suggestion or force of will, an ability to project a circle of peace. Man, I suddenly realized how foolish my rescue fantasy was, and that the real accomplishment would be to de-escalate with a clear posture of peace. I knew this would not be easy, and I still feel that love and peace are the go-to strategies for polarity, even if the results are not predictable. So, to sum up here, we can respond to good storytelling with reflection, reactivity, identification, aversion, and personal insight or fresh understanding. And sometimes a good story might trigger a personal association. In a few moments, perhaps we can share and explore our own reactions to the story about the female chimpanzee and the story about the drunk Japanese man on the train. Thank you for your kind attention.